So welcome to day 3, which means that we are already halfway through the conference, the IWC10. And I can see that part of my job today, especially this morning, is to make sure that everyone stays energized and with the same level of enthusiasm as we saw yesterday and the day before. So we can continue with this experience, this learning and exchange experience. Before we dive into today's agenda, we take a moment to reflect on some of the highlights from Monday, from day 1, the opening session. And we also had the first block of site sessions, as well as yesterday, the technical site visit day. Some of us went to see some peaceful wetlands, like me, for instance. Some ventured out into choppy waters, whereas others stayed in the city. But I think a better way to talk about these first 2 days is by watching the reflections video that our videographers have been working very hard on. With that, I would like you to...
Welcome to the 10th GEF International Waters Conference, celebrating 30 years of impactful achievements in transboundary water cooperation. On day 1, IWC10 proudly hosted nearly 400 participants, welcomed by the government of Uruguay and the event's organizers.
Es un honor para mí estar hoy aquí en la apertura de la 10ª Conferencia Bienal de Aguas Internacionales del GEF y que la organización ha escogido a Uruguay en este magnífico lugar donde el Río de la Plata se une con el Océano Atlántico para celebrar este significativo aniversario.
En el ámbito del sistema acuífero guaraní, uno de los reservorios de agua dulce más importantes del mundo, estamos avanzando en el proyecto de implementación del programa de acción estratégica que busca consolidar la cooperación transfronteriza entre los países del sistema acuífero guaraní, controlar la calidad y cantidad de sus aguas y fomentar la igualdad de género en su gestión.
The success of the International Waters Program and everything that the Global Environment Facility does is thanks to all of you, to government partners, agencies, project managers, civil society organizations, private sector partners, indigenous peoples and local communities across this beautiful blue planet.
En este contexto se hace preciso, desde la urgencia, por un lado un llamado a la acción, por otro lado seguir fortaleciendo las alianzas y por último ampliar las experiencias y el conocimiento.
International waters are everywhere in the region, are fundamental for sustainable development.
Setting the stage for IWC10, under the theme Transformative Actions and Impacts for the Water and Ocean SDGs, the GEF-IW response to the global challenge. The GEF Secretariat emphasized the vital contributions of diverse stakeholders to the success of the International Waters portfolio, underscored also by Independent Evaluation Office.
The entire GEF partnership has evolved to where it is today in response to the global environmental challenges we face and decisions taken by the entire GEF partnership.
A tribute to the 30 years of GEF International Waters, brought forth untold stories and testimonials from key figures who shaped its success.
The GEF is not just any funding source, and this biennial conference is not just any water conference. That is because your job is immensely difficult in helping multiple countries work together for their shared water bodies and for shared peace among regional neighbors.
It's never boring, this portfolio. You know, one day you are a scientist, and the next day you're working with the politicians on the development of the strategic action program and national action plans.
We need integrated approaches. We need to look at transversal issues and tackle that across those big systems.
We need to continue to build strong partnerships, using also the development bank and the investors to to create financing models.
A policy discussion centered on experiences from different regions marked the kickoff.
The project is looking at utilizing groundwater as a means to address environmental, climate resilience, and water security issues that are common to these small Pacific nations.
The journey of the evolution of the GEF-IW portfolio in Latin America was explored through the stories of 7 regional projects of interconnected water bodies and their supported ecosystems.
5 countries, Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Uruguay, we shared a common vision and a political commitment in 1969.
The opening segment concluded with the history and evolution of IW Learn, a unique service to the international waters focal area, from its inception through to its 5th phase, and the launch of the GEF International Waters Story Map.
IW Learn is the GEF's International Waters Learning Exchange and Resource Network, a project, but more accurately, a living process.
The knowledge is being brought by you. You are on the ground, you are doing the work, and you're just bringing your lessons and you're sharing them with the community.
The afternoon featured interactive sessions and workshops, diving deeper into the next generation of transboundary cooperation and governance.
We tried to do in the session on looking at the future and evolution of the TVA SAP process, really get input into what has worked, what hasn't worked. At this time, you know, we really need to reevaluate the practical implementation of the SAP and how this can be better supported going into the future.
This celebratory day concluded with a welcome reception hosted by the Ministry of Environment of Uruguay. On day 2, we set off to the technical site visits. From technical solutions to the breathtaking nature and biodiversity of Uruguay, we roamed from Montevideo and Santa Lucia wetlands to 3 major Uruguayan lagoons with a diverse range of fauna and environmental conservation initiatives, and to the newly established marine protected area around Isla de Lobos. The day closed with a scenic social event, building relations among the new and old members of the International Waters family.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's very powerful to see all these images of people interacting and insightful speeches. I take this opportunity to thank again CAF and IDB for supporting us in the organization of the technical site visits yesterday, and that also includes the cocktail in the iconic Casa Pueblo that was offered by IDB. We are still, let's say, the complete set of images and videos from yesterday, it's still coming together. And the full video that will include stunning drone images and other interviews will be showed tomorrow. Okay, so I move on to day 3, moving on to today. The theme of today is bridging then and now, impactful solutions, tools, and innovative approaches. So essentially, we see this as an evolution from the celebration of the 30 years of GEF IW that we had on Monday to today. And some of the key questions we would like to answer today is, what are the key tools and solutions that we have today that deserve to be showcased and shared and replicated in other areas and maybe also scaled up to entire regions? And which of these innovative approaches we are most proud of, and despite all the challenges that we face in developing them and ultimately in implementing them? So I promise you that today will be equally exciting and stimulating. I hope for that. This morning, the morning panel session actually is divided into two segments. The first segment, we will talk about integrated and holistic solutions. We already mentioned that on the first day, the importance of integrated solutions to address transboundary issues. And hopefully we'll have also an interesting discussion on what does it entail in practice. The second segment is on the importance and implications of policy coherence, so both in freshwater systems and in marine systems, and again, the challenges that this brings. With this short introduction, I would like to invite on stage Dr. Jeffrey Griffin, who is the Senior Coordinator at the GEF Coordination Unit, Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment at FAO, and who will be moderating the first segment. Yes, you can sit over there. And I get to.
Okay. Susan's speaking first, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to do Susan?
Yes, you. Okay, so as the first item in this segment, I would like also to invite Dr. Susan Schmeier on stage. Don't be shy.
So should I sit here or I'll block the slides?
Maybe for this bit it's better there. Who will give us a presentation. We'll start off with a presentation on integrated approaches in the context of GEF IW. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudette. We figured out who goes first, Jeff or I. So as Claudette was saying, here's the clicker. The focus of this morning is on a number of issues that we've learned from the past, but that we also consider are important for moving ahead. One of them, obviously, being the question of integration. And I will just share a few thoughts that not only myself, but also our colleague Astrid Hillers, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, have come up with when it comes to integration, what we've learned, but especially also what it takes to move forward. Obviously, integration is a topic that is both a challenge and an opportunity for GEF, for individual GEF projects, for overall GEF programming, but, and I think that's super important to keep in mind, for societies as a whole. There's a lot we can achieve through GEF programming, GEF projects, the work we do in countries, in basins, in regions, but that will always be embedded in the broader societal context, which, as you all know, is not an easy one these days, basically everywhere in the world. But let's look specifically at water. In this case, freshwater, but I think the same goes for marine. As water people, we of course put water itself, but also the challenges that water faces, easily summarized as too much, too little, or too dirty, at the center. But that is already not a given in societies. Very often instead, water is seen as an input factor to different water uses, for human settlements, for producing food and energy, for alleviating or at least fighting poverty, or it is seen as something that needs to be managed, that needs to maybe be even engineered, such as responding to floods and droughts. But of course, we also have the more ecosystem, biodiversity side, but then we also have the overall societal system in which water often just plays a small role, although as water people, of course, that's why I put it in the center, we're all aware of the big role it plays, even in issues that seem to be a bit further removed, such as water-related conflict and cooperation, so peace and cooperation. But I think this makes very clear that integration is crucial. Integration to tackle all sorts of environmental issues, but specifically water, which is why we're here. If we zoom out a little bit, we actually also see this if we look at this. This is the global risk mapping of the World Economic Forum, where you can also see, even if you can't read it, maybe the green dots, which are all related to environmental issues, and you can see how this links in this very complex web to all sorts of other issues that we need to deal with as societies. So this makes it quite clear how integration is crucial as the basis for tackling any societal challenges that we want to deal with, and specifically with regards to water, the crucial role that water plays. Similarly, for the SDGs, most of you have probably seen this, you can really see how fresh and marine water resources, together with land-based ecosystems and the climate, are really at the core, are at the basis of achieving all the other SDGs, which again means they need to be managed among themselves, the four, in an integrated manner, but also clearly they need to be integrated into the other SDGs and the objectives that we see there in a way that goes both ways. So not only seeing them as input factors that can just be used to produce food or industrial goods or whatever it is, but actually in a two-way approach, basically. So we're talking about integration. I think I've emphasized why we need integration, but what actually is integration? I think for a long time, we in the GEF, we in the water, in the environmental community, but also more generally, have perceived integration as something that is needed to avoid negative effects of one action in one sector, in one policy area on another. So avoiding or reducing intended, unintended, mostly negative impacts of an action in one area on another. I think what we're increasingly seeing is that there is a second side of the coin, which is actually making the whole more than the sum of the parts. So harvesting the benefits of integration by looking at things in an integrated manner, which obviously, and I'm not going to go into detail here, requires a lot of things that are not easy, that are not given, such as thinking out of the box, bridging sectoral divides, but also overcoming related power structures, which can often be very firm in keeping certain sectoral divides or certain interests, but also empowering stakeholders and bridging across governance levels from the very local to the transboundary and the global level. Within the GEF context, integration has been approached comprehensively and from early on. First, sort of in the context of the general discourse, very much by focusing on preventing the negative effects of action in one policy area on another one, but increasingly over the last years also looking at the additional benefits that can be generated by taking an integrated approach. That is, you might be aware of the discussion around social co-benefits that GEF projects can bring, but in a recent STUP paper, we also looked at the peace co-benefits that joint integrated management of shared water resources can actually bring. And if you look at the development of the GEF portfolio over time, you can see that this has also been reflected in increasingly integrated programming, from the Integrated Ecosystem Management Program all the way to the IPs that we see today. I'll briefly just show you what this means for GEF 8 overall, where you have the focal areas, but a very big share of the slide and of the GEF portfolio on integrated programs, global programs. And if we look specifically at water, clearly with an emphasis on three objectives that obviously, naturally require integration if we want to achieve global environmental benefits there, but also the co-benefits, both economic and peace, that I mentioned. I'm not sure I can go back. Yes, because what I want to highlight is that in spite of the progress that has been made, I think many challenges remain, and we're here at the conference to discuss those and think how we can overcome them. But I would also like to make a little note that while I think we've made a lot of progress in integrated programs until today, water, at least in my humble opinion, is still somewhat underrepresented. It clearly is in everything that exists there, in the various integrated approaches that have been there. If you look at sustainable cities, integrated food programs, and so on. But is water really at the center in the way I showed it on my first slide, or is water actually still seen as an input factor for something else? So just some food for thought for today. I don't want to say too much about this, but just provide you some additional food for thought after breakfast on how to ensure integration in projects, because I think that's what we want to focus on today. We can, of course, talk about overall societal challenges, how the poly crisis that we're in, the increasing unilateral tendencies we see in many governments, the financial crisis many governments, many regions find themselves in affects our ability to work in an integrated manner, but that's maybe something we can't change, at least not here and today. But focusing on what we can do in our projects, in the GEF programming, is something that we can and we should indeed be discussing. So how can we better understand integration challenges, but also opportunities that we see in the projects, and how can we incorporate those in the project rationale and in the theory of change And for that little commercial break, I would like to invite you for a session that we're doing by STEP this afternoon, where we're talking about how to design good GEF projects, including with a focus on the theory of change and the project rationale. So you're all invited to come to that, end of the commercial break. Looking at other ways to ensure integration in and through projects, I also want to highlight the question of risks. A lot of discussion has been there on risk appetite over the last months. Of course, integration can come with risks. The bigger you make something, the more different factors and actors and ministries and stakeholders you bring in, the more complicated it gets. So maybe it becomes more risky for projects, but at the same time, the benefits that you can achieve, the way to which you can expand environmental and co-benefits by being more integrated might actually make that risk well worth taking. Of course, it's also a question how we can look at involving stakeholders within and specifically beyond the water sector better in our projects, and how we can not necessarily improve, but maybe expand the knowledge management. And here, one idea that I would have is, yes, it's great to have IW. Yes, it's great we have the IW Learn community and we're all here, but can we also think about an IW Plus, something where we engage with the agriculture people, where we engage with the energy sector, where we engage maybe with ministries of finance and whomever else it takes to actually make a change in an integrated manner. So again, food for thought for the sessions later. All with the idea that we move from a situation that we have now, where we do see some links, like ecosystems being a basis for water or water being a basis for food, and we address them with individual projects or programs, to a situation, and this is just my limited graphic design abilities, but to a situation where we really appreciate how water is connected to everything, also to things we often don't acknowledge, such as political dimensions or the cultural and the spiritual value of water, and how through more integrated approaches, programs, we can really tackle these societal challenges. And with that, I would just invite you to check out some publications on the topic that you might find helpful. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much, Suzanne, for those for setting the stage so well for our coming event, and welcome to the talk show on Towards More Integrated Solutions. I'd like to invite the panelists to please come up on stage while I can introduce you as you come up here. First coming on stage is Ms. Isabel Vanderbeck. She's the International Waters Task Manager for UNEP. Followed by Mr. Lorenzo Galbiati, who's the lead international waters person for FAO GEF. And last but not least, Mr. Adnan Awad, lead for international waters at UNDP. So we have quite an agenda for you today. We have 3 integrated programs, and Suzanne hinted at those in her slides. That we're going to spend some time discussing. The experts on each one will answer 2 questions. And we'll go one question at a time. And without further ado, since I know we're very short for time here, we'll start with the first question. This will be posed to Lorenzo Galbiati regarding the Clean and Healthy Oceans Integrated Program. Yes, they're coming. Do you have the microphone there, Lorenzo?
Yeah.
Great, so let's jump right into it. Lorenzo, what is the Clean and Healthy Oceans Integrated Program aiming to do? Give us your elevator pitch, you could say, to the audience.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, colleagues. So the Clean and Healthy Ocean IP Integrated Program aims to accelerate global effort to address marine hypoxia and nutrients pollution from agriculture, industrial, and municipal sources. The SHOW IP, as we call it in the family, do that through policy, regulatory measure, and infrastructure investment combined with natural-based solution. So as a very good friend of mine will say, integrate the integrated. Why it is important to address marine hypoxia? Allow me to give quickly few figures to understand the scale of the problem. Low oxygen areas have expanded by 4.5 million square kilometers since 1960, meaning that today we have over 500 dead zones in the ocean, which correspond to a surface of the entire European Union. So despite many strategies, investment, successful projects, the problem is still there, so we need to do more. As you know, the main causes of hypoxia are land-based pollution and nutrients runoff from agriculture, which account for more than 80% of the problem, but also urban and industrial areas. On top, 70–80% of the wastewater is still discharged in the ocean without any kind of treatment. And finally, climate change and warming ocean are making the problem even worse. So solubility of oxygen is decreasing and stratification of the oxygen is also increasing, making hypoxia more dangerous. So the goal of the Clean and Healthy Ocean IP is to generate global environmental benefit in selected participating countries, thank you, and LMEs to produce ecological, social, and economic benefits. So stay tuned, there will be more information on these IPs, but as I said, we are addressing a very important issue for the ocean. There is a lot to be done, and this integrated approach of the GEF has a lot of innovation, and maybe we will go to the next question. Over to you, Jeff.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Lorenzo. Let's move right on to Isabel van de Beek, who will answer the same question regarding the Plastic Reboot Integrated Program. Isabel, what does this IP, what is it aiming to do?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on integration. So we have rebaptized our program with a sexy title, hopefully, as Plastic Reboot, because the linear model that we all know is not going to work any longer. So we want to adopt truly a circular approach to this plastic issue. We are working, this graph is actually presenting to you the whole program. So I'll briefly introduce it to you. So it's $109 million. It's co-led by UNEP and WWF with the support of UNIDO and UNDP. And we have 15 child projects spread around the world, from the Pacific Islands to South Asia, to Southeast Asia, to Africa and Latin America. And they are all glued through a global platform child project, which we call the GCP. With the view that this GCP integrates us all, because the focus actually of all the the child projects, is national. So that ultimately, as the Jeff loves to say, the whole is greater than the sum of the part, and that's truly what we are looking forward to be able to unpack circular solutions to plastic pollution. So we will not work in the whole of the plastic sector. That's way too ambitious. Yes, we do have a lot of money, but that wouldn't be enough. We will focus on the upstream and midstream aspect of the value chain, and we are focusing on the food and beverage sector, the single-use plastic packaging only. We are not working downstream. So we want to eliminate single-use plastic products and packaging. We want, or at least to initiate the process. We want to enable circular design of material products and business models, and we want to ensure that circulation of materials and products in practice through reuse and refill systems. So we'll be working with the different sectors, lots of private sector as well, from the food and beverage companies, the big ones and the local ones. So we will be working with Nestle, amongst others, with the farmers, with the grocers, with the markets, with the food service venues, the restaurants, the cafeteria, the hotels, the schools, etc., the airlines as well. So as you can tell from the right side of this slide, we will do that through a menu of activities, enabling change in policy and regulatory framework, working with the countries on national framework for circular economy, codes and standards, extended producer and responsibility, deposit return schemes, and bans of problematic plastic. Our second category of activity will be working and engaging with the private sector on alternatives to plastic, circular design, and reuse and refill system. We also have a very important cluster of activities looking at mobilizing finance. So we are setting up an incubator mechanism. We will be looking at fiscal policies and see how we can systematically rope in private investment and other additional funding. And finally, behavior and social change is critical. So we will dive into that, looking amongst other things at buying behavior and labeling. As I said, private sector is key, and we will test with them a circular solution to reduce plastic. We will catalyze with them system change with the businesses, and we will work with them through an incubator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabel. So colleagues, you've heard now so far today from two integrated programs, one focused on reducing land-based sources of pollution to the world's oceans, and the other introducing circular solutions to plastic pollution. Two of the key challenges facing us today, and very relevant to most of the projects that are here in the room today as well. Let's go now to the third IP. Adnan, what is the Blue and Green Islands integrated program doing in a nutshell? Over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, in a nutshell, in a quick 2-minute version, this integrated program on Blue and Green Islands, it's really premised on the recognition that for SIDS, the blue economy and the green economy are intractable, right? They're inseparable. There's a high dependence on nature and on the sustainability of both the blue and green resources. There's also a high vulnerability to various threats and pressures, especially those associated with climate change within SIDS. But the program also recognizes the significant potential for SIDS to play a role in advancing innovation and as incubators for natural-based solutions. So the program is going to advance this premise really through 3 component areas. First of all, the integration of nature within the policy architecture and decision and planning making mechanisms. Second of all, the implementation of nature-based solutions, and to do these at landscape and seascape levels for ecosystems that underpin the key sectors for development. And the program has identified those specifically as the food, tourism, and urban sectors. So that's where a lot of the focus in the projects will be. The project focuses on 15 countries, the child projects, and these will be implemented through the 6 GEF agencies shown on the screen in partnership. At UNDP, we're leading on 5 of those child projects, as well as the Global Coordination Project that aims to align a lot of the programmatic activities and outcomes across the IP. A big part of the program is also really to start to get at this private sector engagement issue, which can be so elusive, especially at the scale necessary, the smaller scales, right? And to do so by unlocking some of the capital and action of the finance and investment community. This really means, the financing and investment directly, but potentially more important, the actions of industry, engaging industry, participation of industry, perhaps through industry alliances that can help serve the value chains and some of the negotiations that need to be done for some of the sort of collective action that is planned between countries and between projects. The project has completed the PPG and been submitted. We're anticipating an inception workshop for early 2025, and between now and then we're planning 2 side events, one for the CBD COP and one for CCD COP. And we have a website on the UNDP website specific to this IP that has a lot more information than I've been able to cover here.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Adnan, for highlighting the main points of that IP. which is seeking to maximize the opportunities, unique opportunities in SIDS to tackle some of these key issues. And I think you've also heard today the truly integrated nature of each one of these IP in tackling these problems. Let's go to round two now for the second slide. Are we all lined up here?
Yeah.
Okay. So Lorenzo, back to you. What is the relevance of the Clean and Healthy Ocean IP to the overall International Waters Program?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And I'm sorry, I have a light pointing here. I hope that the reflection on my bald head is not bothering you from the audience. But I can mention 4 reasons why this IP is highly relevant to the international water focal area. And the first one is that the IP works across watersheds, coastal areas, and LMEs. And although the name is Clean and Healthy Ocean, all the action happen in the watershed, benefiting the oceans. So we know that the pollution runoff resulting in hypoxia degrades freshwater and marine ecosystem and also affect associated fisheries and habitats. So reducing these pollutants will directly support the achievement of multiple goals and action of IW. Allow me to mention some of them, like enhanced security, freshwater ecosystem, sustaining healthy blue economy, advancing sustainable fishery management through LME's collaboration, and mobilizing strategic investments and also the engagement of private sector. This was the second reason why the IP is highly relevant. The third one is a bit more practical, is that this IP will directly contribute to 4 of the core indicators of GEF8, which are targeted by the international water focal areas, and these are core indicator 2, 5, 7, and 8. And last but not least, as you can see in the small map here at the bottom of these slides, the IP will work in 14 countries through national projects, addressing different aspects of the hypoxia, so the sector producing nutrients ending up in the ocean, but also through a global coordination project, which will provide coordination and global and regional platforms and opportunities for the national activities to be upscaled to regional and global level. The IP will benefit at least 3 LMEs with the ambition to increase the number of these LMEs during the execution of the IP, and it builds on the leadership and expertise of FAO, 3 regional development banks, which are ADB, CAF, EBRD, the science and data-driven support to decision-making of UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and the experience in developing partnership and engage stakeholders in the source-to-sea continuum of the Global Water Partnership. In addition, the 14 child projects are implemented by a wide range of implementing agencies, as you can see here in the slide. And so this is a wide partnership integrating agri-food system, science, finance, and stakeholder to benefit freshwater and the ocean. The IP has been the last one to be approved by the Council, so we are still in PPG phase. We aim to conclude the preparation of the project document and aim to see an endorsement of this IP over the next few months. The ambition is to begin the execution in the countries at the global level in the first quarter or half of 2025. By then, we will have a dedicated website to the Clean and Healthy Ocean IP, and we are really looking forward to populate that IP, that website with important information to open also to the global community to contribute to it. So the IPs, in a certain sense, are like a living creature that will begin with the approval of the project document, but we are really trying to develop a platform which is open to new ideas, new contributions that may pop up during the execution of this integrated program. So as I said, stay tuned. We are working all together on this very important issue, and I really look forward to exchange with any of you if you are interested to have more information and cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and I'm sure there'll be many, many connections to develop further as this program gets up and running with the entire IW portfolio. Okay, let's go to the question for Isabel. Back to Isabel. Isabel, what cross-cutting platforms can be put in place by your IP to engage others?
Thank you, Jeff. So our global platform child project, or GCP, or the glue to the program, has been approved in August of this year. So the team at both WWF and UNEP are really getting active to create the first version of this global and service hub. The plastic agenda is very complex. It's new within the GEF to a certain extent at that scale. It's also a complex objective to move on with the sustainable circular solution. As I said earlier on, it's much easier to continue the linear model. So we want to create a global knowledge and service hub which is useful not only for the child projects and to support them all, in providing resources, in providing different platforms for them to connect to one another, but we also want to harness the best of what's happening outside in the world with the private sectors, with other stakeholders. So the global platform, child projects, aka the GLUE, will provide a series of technical assistance services to the National Child Project with their national policy framework on circular economy, for example, with the legal and policy support on what works in terms of ban, phase out, and reduce policies, also providing support to establish reuse and refill systems and alternatives to plastic, also advices on EPR, extended producer responsibility, and so on and so forth. So that technical service component of the GCP will generate, as you can imagine, a lot of resources. So that's going to feed into the knowledge and service hub of the GCP. We are also looking at supporting the agenda more globally, addressing global barriers. So private sector, as I mentioned, is a key stakeholder. It's a must-have. So we need to get to know it better, and the GCP will help us to get to know the private sector better and how to engage better with the private sector at the level of the National Child Project. This will be a key element also of our platform. We will look also at advancing some of the global matters, such as plastic disclosure metrics, and we will look at finance and investment guidelines. So all of those resources, again, will feed into the hub, and the hub will allow us to also have a platform to share experience and lessons learned from the National Child Project. So that's an additional resource going to the hub. It will provide facilities on knowledge exchange, such as forums, informal dialogue for idea sharing, and all sorts of other products, including communications products. So the idea, and we are just starting, the idea is to create a global resource website.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabel, for highlighting those key platforms and technical services that will benefit others across the IW portfolio and the GEF partnership. Let's go to the final question, this one for Adnan. Adnan, what is the relevance of Blue and Green Islands IP to the rest of the IW portfolio?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's a good question. It's a relevant question. I think listening to Lorenzo and Isabel, it just strikes me how much structural similarity there is in not just these three IPs, but with those that are already up and running. And, that invites a dialogue for how some of those cross-cutting functions can be perhaps shared. But more specifically about Blue-Green Islands, there's certainly thematically significant overlap with the goals of the IP and its child projects and those of the IW portfolio. And that invites scope for alignment between projects and their intended outcomes in areas such as integrated coastal management, marine spatial planning, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, pollution control, water quality issues, and certainly obviously nature-based solutions and the blue economy. But also indeed in terms of, for the geographies where it's relevant, alignment with and contribution to SAP implementation processes. So there's, I think a lot to be looked at there in terms of that type of alignment. The program is looking to establish a global platform that itself will be comprised of several components or hubs. The first of these hubs is the Knowledge Management and Learning Hub. The hubs are going to be made effective through partnerships, technical partnerships. And the Knowledge Management and Learning Hub is looking to establish thematic working groups, effectively communities of practice. So there we can imagine a strong role for the IW Learn program to contribute to and benefit from this hub. The second hub is the Policy and Practice Hub, whereby guidance and technical assistance will be offered to the projects in areas such as natural capital accounting, ecosystem service valuations, spatial planning, and also the integration and support for gender within the projects. So those are the two hubs. The third component is the Nature-Based Solutions Accelerator, and the accelerator is intended to have two functions. One is the Technical Assistance Facility, which will provide guidance to the projects in how to assess those target sectors, the food, urban, and tourism sectors, for the solutions that can be brought to scale. The other side of the accelerator is looking at the investment component, where it's meant to match the investment community with the solutions. And let's be clear, when we talk about solutions, we're talking about small businesses. We're talking about projects and programs of organizations on the ground that need that technical assistance, need the direct investment. So matching those with the investment community in a way that they can benefit at the scale and the type of financing that they actually need. So I think collectively this global platform, which will also have some regional differentiation through regional partners, established regional partners, it represents a set of services, a set of facilities that should ideally have a broader utility, across the GEF projects, certainly to other SIDS, to other coastal countries, and definitely we're intending to IW projects. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Adnan, for highlighting the broader utility. I'll pick up on that last point you just made of this IP and the others to the rest of the IW portfolio, and I'd say across the GEF partnership. Well, that concludes our talk show. I know we are pressed for time, so I will thank the panelists. Thanks Lorenzo Galbiati, Isabel Vanderbeck, and Adnan Awad. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have got the message. That we need to increasingly emphasize integrated learning about integrated solutions, and these three integrated programs will go a long way to helping us do that in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, for providing us more information on the status of the IPs and integration in more general sense. I invite you to get in touch with the three IP coordinators if you have specific questions or would like to know more. Without further delay, I would like now to welcome to the stage Dr. Hartwig Kramer, head of the GEF IW portfolio and unit in UNEP, who will be moderating the second segment of today's plenary that will focus on policy coherence.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. We'll have a speed dating kind of panel now because we're asked to be really fast on time. So can I immediately ask our speakers to join the podium, And we will have Sonja Köppel with us from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and she is involved in leading on the Transboundary Watercourse Convention. She's also in the Protocol for Water and Health. We have Julian Barbier with us from UNESCO, IOC, and working on ocean governance, and the Decade, Mark Sutton, Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Edinburgh, Scotland, on the INMS, the Nitrogen Management System, and Andrew Hume from JEFSEC. And thank you for being with us. I'm staying here in order to be able to help us navigate through this set of really complex and important topics. And let me right away start on the plenary on policy coherence and challenges with you, Sonja. And tell us, why is the Water Convention important? Why do we need it?
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. So we have heard a lot over those last 2 days about good practices regarding international waters, but also about challenges such as sustainability of projects, financing, transboundary water cooperation, etc. And if we look globally, only 26 countries actually worldwide so far meet the SDG indicator 6.5.2, which measures the progress of transboundary water cooperation out of the 153 flagging transboundary waters. So we need actually still much more progress. And this is exactly where the two United Nations Water Conventions help. Particularly the 1992 Water Convention, Helsinki Convention, serviced by UNECE, is now a unique global legal and intergovernmental framework and platform which has advanced practically transboundary water cooperation over the last more than 30 years. On the one hand, by mobilizing political willingness of countries to cooperate. On the other hand, by providing rules and by actually obliging the parties to develop agreements, set up joint bodies, prevent pollution, and many other things which we are talking of here today. For example, more than 140 agreements, transboundary agreements worldwide, are actually inspired by the Water Convention. And so the Water Convention provides a common language also for the countries to cooperate. Also, the Water Convention supports by providing a long-term platform and ensuring coherence, which can lead to DF projects, but also sustain projects afterwards, such as in the Drin, in the Dniester, in the Chutalas, also in the Senegal-Mauritanian Aquifer Basin, and many others. And by helping countries to address challenges such as climate change, such as policy integration, which we'll talk of in this panel, etc. And that is, the Water Convention is also now global since a few years. And we currently have 55 parties, including 12 from Africa, Panama from Latin America, Iraq from the Middle East, and 3 have joined just over the last weeks, namely Ivory Coast, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and 20 more are in the process. So I hope many of you are either already part or will also join, such as at our upcoming meeting of the parties, which will be held in 1 month from now in Slovenia, where we'll discuss many of those topics, and I hope to see many of you there.
Thank you very much, Sonja, for that, and we'll come back to that. So I'll give the floor to Mark. Mark, the International Nitrogen Management System, question mark. Tell us, what is it?
Okay.
Why do we need it?
Yeah, okay, so International Nitrogen Management System, imagine a science-based approach for supporting international policy. Now, you all know these different conventions. They've all got different ways of working. We've got our own experience of dipping in and out of your different conventions. And firstly, what is clear is that we have fragmentation. We need to address that fragmentation. We need scientific support for doing that. So we're a developing process of international scientific support. It's been running now for almost 10 years. And on the way, we're very happy to have had support from the GEF and through UNEP for that. So distinguish between two things. One is towards INMS, the project, but those projects are contributing to this longer process of the International Nitrogen Management System. That means we need a long-term approach. We need coherency with scientists listening to you if you're governments, if you're in their negotiation. So we're in your meetings listening, translating that into scientific terms, and then pushing our community to get the evidence we need to help you answer your questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for this explanation. I think that is really almost pitching and it also bridges to what we learned before, for instance, from the child project, Clean and Healthy Ocean. Julian, since I joined the community some 25 years ago, I think the science policy interface was always a topic. Now, the question to you, can you highlight some key challenges, Julian, that we are facing in open space, in the ocean space in terms of policy integration or the lack of? And now comes the really critical point, where science can potentially be of assistance.
Thanks, Hartwig. And probably 25 years ago, you and I were probably already talking about some of these issues, I think. Indeed, so I think fragmented ocean governance is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have in the ocean space. And I just want to highlight maybe 3 areas where I think science can bring some solutions, both by providing a strong science evidence, through technological advancements, and through developing frameworks for collaboration. Sectoral fragmentations, we all know about this, different sectors follow different policies. On top of that, we have jurisdictional complexity from local scale to national into area beyond national jurisdiction. So I think one strong progress we have seen in recent years is the emergence of standardized marine spatial planning as a tool to really facilitate coordination across borders and across sectors. And this is an area where IOC has been building the science of MSP for the last 20 years. I think what MSP brings, and people maybe just tend to look at it from a management process, but there's also a very strong science component to it, which really is about bringing scientific information into an integrated framework, which is looking at the present and the future conditions of the ocean. That requires mapping ocean ecosystems, services, and identifying conflicts and synergies. So I think I'm very happy to see that the JF in the last 10 years has taken on this tool of MSP quite importantly at the level of LMEs in particular, and in the IWLearn project that we have, and in this phase and the previous phase, we have also a strong component on marine spatial planning. Another aspect, I think, where we need stronger science there is the integration between climate and ocean policies. We know that, again, those are sectoral policies that sometimes are not making connections and talking to each other. And there, I think, integrated climate ocean models that stimulate the impact of climate change on marine ecosystems can be very useful. They can help to, for forecasting, understand the impacts of sea level rise, for example, to the coast, and help formulate climate adaptation and development policies. But we also need to get this information in a much faster and operational way. We can't just wait for articles to be published. We need operational services that really are informing and bring the data to the end users so we have rapid response. And then the third element, I think, where we could also work on this, is really looking at local communities and indigenous groups. Right. Which I think very often are not considered or overlooked by national processes into the decision making. And it's important to bring the knowledge that these groups have to also make sure that they have ownership of the process and the policies, they are part of it, and they can also inform this through different participatory approaches.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian. Don't be irritated by times is up, because we go that question by question. Policy coherence, whole of society, I think that was what you also were referring to, Julian. Let's us now move into actually the high seas, and I would like to give the floor to you, Andrew. We have the BBNG coming up after 15 years of really hardcore negotiations. So what might help promote policy coherence with BBNG?
Yeah, thank you, Hartwig. Perhaps it's best to start with a little bit of context, and especially relevant to the JEF's new role in supporting the BBNJ agreement. So as many of you already likely know, one of the main functions of the JEF is to serve as a financial mechanism to multilateral environmental agreements, including currently the UNFCCC, the CBD, UNCCD, Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, and the Minamata Convention on Mercury. So in June of last year, countries adopted the new Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, or BBNJ agreement. There's actually a much longer title that I haven't memorized and don't need to, but the BBNJ agreement is a key element to this ocean governance context that we're talking about. So the adopted text of the agreement identifies the JEF Trust Fund as part of the BBNJ agreement financial mechanism. And this is the first time that the JEF International Waters Focal Area will now serve in a formal role in service to a multilateral environmental agreement. We will absolutely continue to support many other conventions that have a long history with the IW Focal Area, like the UN Water Convention. as well as others like port state measures and many more. So that's not changing, but what is new is this new formal role that for IW to play. So in response to the adoption of the BB agreement text through a series of council decisions from our GEF Council and GEF Assembly, the decisions have been taken to allocate the entirety of the GEF 8 IW Objective 2, which is addressing AB&J or areas beyond national jurisdiction, to the BB&J agreement. This is roughly 34 million. And so the focus right now is on supporting GEF recipient countries in the ratification and implementation readiness of the agreement, working towards a global target of at least 60 countries ratifying the agreement before it can enter into force. If anyone wants more detail on how this is going to be operationalized, I'm happy to explain it. But when it comes to policy coherence in BB&J, I think the first thing we should say is that this is all still hypothetical. The agreement has not entered into force, and so we're not really in a position to talk about how to then mainstream and integrate policy at a national level, but we certainly are anticipating it and planning it. The agreement itself is trying to address a patchwork of ocean governance issues and trying to fill major gaps, and so the big focus is around access and benefit sharing on marine genetic resources, area-based management tools, including MPAs, environmental impact assessments, and capacity building and transfer of marine technology. So when it comes to the IW folk layer taking on this new formal role, there's certainly lots of opportunities, but there's also a deep obligation to support countries in harmonizing these national policies across this complex patchwork in ocean governance, especially to ensure at the national level the policy coherence can then scale to these regional and global positions. Am I over time?
We can come back.
Okay.
That was just question number one.
Sure.
And we'll have three for each, so two more to come. So back to the Water Convention, and thanks, Andrew. I think we will have to talk about that more. The Water Convention supports policy coherence, does it? Does it really? I mean, we really ask you, and if so, what do you think the Water Convention can do to support sustainability of the GEF International Waters portfolio?
Thank you very much. The Water Convention is really a living instrument. So parties have recognized that this topic of policy coherence is an important challenge. And that's why already in 2012, they decided to create a task force on the water, food, energy ecosystem nexus, exactly recognizing that water, energy, agricultural policies need to be coordinated in order to prevent conflicts. And even across borders, because this is actually the most difficult, not only coordinating at national level, but also coordinating at basin level, which requires diplomacy, sometimes involvement of foreign affairs, conflict prevention, etc. So in the framework of this Nexus Task Force, for example, has been developed a methodology for carrying out Nexus assessments, which has been implemented in more than 7 transboundary basins worldwide. The Nexus Task Force is also an intergovernmental platform where actually those different sectors come together from different parts of the world. And here cooperation has happened with GF and IWC actually over the last years already. Particularly over the last years, we have focused a lot also on water-energy interlinkages, because this is often one of the biggest challenges I think we still have, but maybe we can come back to this a bit later in the next round. In addition, source to sea. I mean, this has been mentioned a lot already on Monday. And the Water Convention, I would say to some extent, includes the source to sea approach among its obligations, because it obliges the countries also to take into account the coastal areas, etc. But from the reporting, we see that it is still way too little implemented. And that is why 2 years ago was organized a first global workshop on source to sea management under the Water Convention with GF, IWC, SEWE, UNEP, many others who are also here, and under the leadership of Estonia and Slovenia. And this has led to the development of practical guidance on the source to sea management in transboundary basin. We currently have a drafting group which is working and has prepared a first outline of this guidance note, which will be discussed in Slovenia at the meeting of the parties, and should be presented next year to the UN Ocean Conference. So I invite you all to actually contribute also through your case studies, because this will be an officially adopted and agreed upon document at international level on source to sea.
Thank you very much, Sonia. This is indeed important, and I think we heard in the first part of the panel discussions, the source to sea was embedded in all the IP structures and objectives. So that is definitely the scale to go. Mark, you are next, and let's go into more of the practicalities. So what kind of activities has INMS been doing, and what kind of challenges have you been facing?
Yeah, so first off, let's just take the big challenge, and it's really interesting to hear our messages together because the word fragmentation keeps coming up. And with nitrogen, we have this fragmentation between water, air quality, climate change, biodiversity, economy. You go on and on and on. And in the UN system, it means nitrogen has got a piece of the puzzle in all those different systems. So our first challenge is to bring that together scientifically, bring it together in our minds as well about how we can also feed into a process of supporting. So imagine the climate change scientists 30 years ago. They didn't have an intergovernmental panel on climate change, and they started forming. And that's a bit how the nitrogen work has been going, recognizing that we've got this pan-dimensional challenge with nitrogen. You know, nitrogen is just amazingly just as important as carbon, but different, because carbon is climate, but nitrogen is everywhere. Everywhere and invisible is what we say. So our first challenge is to get the scientists working together, but we also have to make a policy home. And actually, the framing policy home Jeff gave us, go and find a policy home, make a policy home. And that's a tough thing to do. You've got an existing convention, but how to make a new one, BBNJ, takes ages. So the way we've been working on that is to work with UNEP, with UNEA, with the member states, making a partnership of our scientists with policy officials to go, particularly with South Asia, go towards 2 resolutions at the United Nations Environment Assembly. Those resolutions have established then that nitrogen is now a topic. And it's something to work on together. There's win-wins between water, air. And if we work on them together, that can help us overcome the barriers. So that is at the heart of it. And so what are we doing? In those resolutions, of course, 192 member states have agreed what those priorities are. One of those is to develop the case for an intergovernmental nitrogen coordination mechanism. That's gradually coming to fruition now in the form of UNEP's Working Group on Nitrogen. A push in the second resolution towards national nitrogen action plans. And there is our science running in parallel, gathering the evidence, firstly towards the international nitrogen assessment, which will be published next year, and today, later on today, we're going to be launching a first nitrogen guidance document on all the different measures you can use to take action.
Brilliant, thanks very much indeed. I mean, that illustrates it, and I quite like also that you make the link between the water realm and the air quality realm, because it is a connective system. It's a cycle across these domains. You also mentioned the IPCC. I mean, the IPCC wouldn't exist were there not the Earth System Science community, and that takes us back to the question on science, and to you, Julian. What science solution exists to address some of these issues, and how can these help the GEF intervention to bridge the policy divide?
Thanks, Hartwig. So I think there are a number of areas where science can really support the GF interventions. And you know, we tend in the ocean science community to look at the value chain from research to data observation and then generation of products and assessments for policy. And I think we need to really start with the observation part of the ocean. We know the ocean is understudied, and one of the goals of the Ocean Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is to achieve by 2030 a truly global ocean observing system, which really responds to the need of users. We have major gaps in the ocean, both in the areas where we are systematically not monitoring parameters, but also coverage, which large part of the ocean which are understudied. So we are interesting innovations there. I just want to highlight, for example, the work which is going on monitoring biodiversity through eDNA, which really allows to scale up those assessments, basically measuring eDNA of species in the water. And we have now a global program called Ocean Biomolecular Observing Network, which is really about building the science and the framework for delivering this information. And of course, this information is important for the TDA SAB process, for the BBNJ process, for identifying MPAs and managing MPAs, as well as, for example, establishing early warning system for alien species that are entering national waters through, again, this eDNA process. The data part is also critical, and I think we are also seeing efforts in integrating data and visualizing ocean data in a much stronger way. There's now a global effort called the Digital Twin of Ocean, which is really about bringing together high-resolution, multi-dimensional, real-time virtual representation of the ocean, combining observations, artificial intelligence, advanced modeling, and high-performance computers. And I think there, policymakers and scientists and citizens can really contribute to those processes, use these global platforms, contribute data, and also use the modeling capacity and power to derive specific products for their needs. Still on data, just to finish, I think we need to also address the issue of ocean accounting, which I think offers an interesting way to integrate the different dimensions of ocean sustainability, looking at environmental assets, economic activities, and social conditions. I think there's only too few countries that have actually ocean accounting mechanisms, and that also requires changing also the type of data that is being collected. The national statistics offices that are structuring these discussions need to be on board. So I think there are different prospects there for really informing and bringing this integration at a much higher level.
Thank you very much, Julian. You brought up actually two very interesting aspects. Before I give the floor back to Andrew, the ocean twinning. I mean, we create, or we're trying to create, a real-time forecasting and early warning avatar that helps us understand the ocean dynamics, and including the connectivity vertically and horizontally and over time, much better than we did in the past. And certainly this feeds into what BBNJ will finally have to utilize when it comes to operationalizing it. So beyond the agreement as a financial mechanism, Andrew, what would it might offer as opportunities to promote policy coherence and integrate the science that Julian just mentioned?
Yeah, thanks, Hartwig. So, I mean, one of the key elements of the programming of the BBNJ ratification support and implementation readiness in this current GEF 8 phase from IW is a new process that we're implementing for IW for the first time, which is enabling activities. So GEF enabling activities, it's a modality. It's been used frequently in other focal areas to support national convention obligations and communications, but we've never used it in IW before. So the focus here will be on funding ratification support activities at a national level, but then these are summarized into what we're calling an initial BBNJ assessment report. This assessment report is essentially, it's a national communication. So it's quite similar in its approach, at least at the current time, towards what's a National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, an NBSAP, or a Nationally Determined Commission, NDC, other conventions. And so in this case, it's exploring different gaps, needs, opportunities of the BBNJ agreement at that national context. And so hopefully this will continue down the road as the agreement enters into force and we begin implementation. There will still be a need for this national communication, and the enabling activities modality that we use in other focal areas could hopefully become part of a mainstream within IW. And ideally, an opportunity here would be to link it to the other major efforts that we're providing under the different supports that we're giving from IW. So TDA SAP at a national level, putting it into national action plans, a national nitrogen plan. How do we integrate the science? How do we potentially even integrate things from the land-based activities, all towards trying to promote this national policy coherence? So I think it's a little too early to see exactly what will happen, but this new process within IW does provide at least an interesting pathway, and we see similar analogies with the other focal areas. So it's quite an exciting time, I think, for the focal area overall.
Right, thank you very much indeed. And I must admit, in the conversations we've had so far with Isabel and our other agencies, with FAO and UNDP and DOALOS, I mean, the co-benefits by implementing BBNJ with other multilateral environmental agreements, and you mentioned GBF and the experience made with the NBSAPs, is quite important. And that also brings me back to the last question to you, Sonia. So co-benefits, conventions, legal agreements, multilateral environmental agreements, what are some of the lessons learned for integrated approaches using the Water Convention? We'll give you a short pitch.
Okay. Thank you. So firstly, I think integrated reports require, on the one hand, indeed scientific analysis, but also political commitment and involving the highest political level. Because the solutions are finally have to come also from the high level. So for example, at COP29, we are planning a high-level panel with the COP presidency, Azerbaijan, on Nexus, exactly on those integrated approaches. And we are also analyzing how transboundary cooperation is included into NDCs and NAPs to see how these issues can come forward. Secondly, I think it's crucial to involve different stakeholders from the civil society, but also obviously the other sectors. And here, in order to involve other sectors, and particularly the more difficult ones, such as energy, I think we really need to look what is in it for them. I remember one instance. I was working more than 10 years ago in the Dniester Basin between Ukraine and Moldova, and we developed climate change impact assessment. We planned to include the energy sector, and they just wouldn't come. And the moment when we managed to interest them was when they realized that their hydropower plants would not be able to function and to bring as much economic benefit under climate change conditions. And then suddenly they started to listen to the water people and to get engaged. So I think if we want to look at new sectors such as energy, we really need to make a step towards them. And it's so crucial because we know water is also important for climate change mitigation, not only adaptation. But for this, indeed, we need to work with them and show, and that's what we've been doing, how water is also crucial for renewable energy, for example, and all these things. And finally, I would like to say we need global advocacy, and that's where I think all our institutions really need to work together. The GEF, the Water Convention, the different agencies who are here. And that's why, for example, we have initiated the creation of the Transboundary Water Cooperation Coalition, where actually many of you are part, which includes more than 40 governments, organizations, IFIs, NGOs, etc., in order to advocate at highest level, at presidential level, including, for example, the Water Conference for Transboundary Cooperation and Integrated Approaches.
So what that comes down to is basically finding the means and use the conventions to generate a joined-up thinking from source to sea across the stakeholders and civil society, as Susan was alluding to in her opening conversation, in her opening presentation. Well, Mark, a question my grandma could have asked, and I'm asking it as well. Why did you choose nitrogen as a focus rather than nutrients in their entirety?
Yeah. So, fair enough. Well, the first thing is, this is a multi-track approach, and the nitrogen is the biggest nutrient. It's also the most expensive nutrient. It's the one with the most immediate problems, and it's the one with the most multidimensionality. So we're also linking to the other nutrients. So just take an example. If you want high nitrogen use efficiency, you've got to be not missing your other nutrients. And actually, this is then work for the future. What about the interactions with micronutrients, for example? That's something we haven't really even started on, but we clearly need a balanced nutrition in plants, in animals, in order to think about the whole system. But when you come to the atmospheric sources, the nitrogen oxides, you don't have really phosphorus going up into the atmosphere. The phosphorus interaction with climate change is much different. So nitrogen gives us that really strong starting point that's going for those win-wins across these this going from fragmentation to integration, emphasizing that we have to work together between climate and energy. Just to give a message about some numbers. The nitrogen wasted as a resource that's lost to air and water in 2022 was about $600 billion per year. It's billion US dollars per year. Now it's about 300. Put it in another perspective. In the EU, they spend 60 billion euros per year on the common agricultural policy. In 2022, the market value of the wasted nitrogen resources as fertilizer was 60 billion euro. So that's just amazing that the amount of nitrogen wasted is equivalent to the total value of agricultural support. Now, if you then add on the externalities, the climate, the other effects, you see how important this is.
Brings us back to the accounting question, up and down the value and the food chain and also the production chains. Thank you very much. Very illustrative numbers, shocking as well, but they are reality. Back to you, Julian. What is being done in the framework of the UN Oceans Decade and on ocean science for sustainable development in this respect and to address these issues?
Well, the Ocean Decade was very much established to support member states in the implementation of SDGs, and particularly SDG 14, but not only, through the delivery of mission-oriented science that addresses some of those key ocean challenges we have in SDG 14, but also looking at the needs for building infrastructures, because We know that the ocean, as I said, is understudied. Only 2% of national research are going into ocean science, in average, globally. So that's not good enough. But also looking at the science policy interface and these issues of integration we're talking about at regional, at national level, as well as looking at capacity aspects and building awareness and ocean literacy around the world. So far we have now, it's a global movement for the last 3 years. We have over 70 countries who are involved in leading decade actions. We have 56 global programs that have been endorsed and are working through a coordinated system, because they are also working together to identify specific knowledge gaps and delivering around those knowledge gaps. But of course, this is not enough, and I think the decade provides a broader enabling environment for this translation of science into action. And one of the core principles is that the science needs to be co-designed and co-delivered, and that requires really building mechanisms for engaging end users in the design of research proposals. And this really is a criteria for any decade actions that eventually gets endorsed. We need to build the science policy at the national level, and we're working in developing national decade committees to have this dialogue between the science and different economic sectors and policymakers. We're building the global architecture, what I mentioned earlier, this issue of ocean observation, data going into forecasting and predictions, required also an architecture and coming up with agreements on interoperability, standards, and understanding user requirements. Of course, also understanding the challenges of data sharing, that is still a major issue in ocean affairs. We are setting up regional priorities, through, for example, regional task groups in each ocean basins. And I think there is a strong link with what our LMEs are doing, and some of those are already engaging in those regional discussions, but also looking at global governance requirements for science, UNFCCC, CBD, BBNJ. We need to address this so that those agreements have the right knowledge base to work. And then finally, 2 important points: broadening partnerships with industry and private sector. These guys need to be at the table, and we're working on data sharing models with the industry, but also getting them on board and telling us what kind of science issues they have in their work. And then finally, financing, because of course all of this needs to be fast-tracked, and we need to see a much higher level of investment at national and global level in those structures.
Very good. Thank you very much, Julian. And I'd like to give the floor to Andrew, and then I'll try to summarize. Andrew, we've heard it from Julian, what needs to come together. We've heard where the challenges are. So any last thoughts to share on where the BBNJ agreement might take the IW focal area to?
Yeah, thank you, Hartwig. So I mean, clearly one of the biggest next opportunities for really the focal area at large is the JEF9 replenishment, which will start early next year. And one of the really interesting things in my mind is, given the momentum and the large global attention really to the BBNJ agreement, how can that really help bring attention to the overall focal area and a lot of the questions that we're asking? We're going to go through the replenishment process, we're going to have donor pledges, and so it's certainly my hope that the attention and the momentum behind the agreement can actually help the overall focal area itself, so to speak. How can the rising tide lift all ships? And so that's certainly my hope, looking down the road over the next year and a half, and then that will set us up for success, not just for the next couple of years, but really all the way towards the 2030 targets that the SDGs, the Global IC Framework, and many other commitments are meeting. It aligns very nicely with JEF9. So I think it's going to be a busy couple of years, but it's a very optimistic time to really try to implement a lot of the things we just had on this panel. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. So this is great. First of all, big thanks to all the panelists, also to taking the time and sticking to the time. In conclusion, what shall I say? I mean, it's a busy time. It's an exciting time that's ahead of us, also with the global environmental agreements coming to a conclusion in 2030. And what I've learned is that it needs us to really work together. UNEP is a normative organization in principle, and the JEF and the other vertical funds help UNEP operationalize at scale what needs to be done to really have a transformational change. Transboundary waters, to me, is the ultimate example of an integrating context when it comes to fluxes and to connecting people and stakeholders. So in operationalizing that, we wouldn't get anywhere hadn't we had the science. And as I mentioned it earlier, without Diversitas, as an earlier Earth System Science program, we wouldn't have IPBES. And I think this is just a few examples where
science policy interfaces work. Local governments, local communities bring their knowledge to the table as well, and whether it's about plastics or water quality or whatever, they have their voice and they have their experiences. We need to look at that as well. The key challenging question in future also is about connectivity, I think. We haven't heard anything about the regional seas conventions, but they play a very, very critical role in operationalizing with their formal and political mandate whatever comes out of governance instruments, tools, and GEF interventions in the land and water and river basin scale and reaches out to the coastal zone and large marine ecosystems. And we wouldn't get away without that. With that, big thanks to the panelists. Wonderful discussions. It was a great session. Thank you all. Coffee break.